Okay, we're back again. It's another week. It's the day before Thanksgiving, and I'm grateful to be here. Even though it's just the day before Thanksgiving, a lot of people are not doing this kind of thing today, but I am. I'm really diligent about being consistent. I want to show up every single week for people that value this type of this type of content and this type of information. So, as the thumbnail and description of this video entails, today we're going to be talking about everything happening in Utah in 2026. And 2026 is going to be a pivotal year in Utah's future moving forward. And I'm excited to talk about these things because here's the thing. I, of course, get to share content on YouTube every single week. And as a real estate broker, yes, that is my job. That is my title. That's what I do every single day. But in all honesty, I really take this job seriously. And I look at it just a little bit different. Rather than being a real estate broker, I consider myself to be a knowledge broker, because that's really what people need. They need knowledge. They need the experience and the knowledge that comes with the deep research in knowing these different areas, knowing what's happening, the building permits that are being applied for, the developments that are up and coming. All of these things really influence your way of life and your experience once you live here. So it's crucial for me as a real estate broker to know these things. And I feel like I'm doing a disservice if I find out that I don't know something. So it's my job to stay on top of things and to keep my finger on the pulse, so to speak, of what's happening in Utah. And of course, I'm super passionate about my state, my home state of Utah, and everything that's happening. But with that said, there are a lot of people that are locals to the state that don't love all of the growth that we've had, right? And that makes a lot of sense. It's reasonable to expect that there's not everybody's going to love this growth and this boom that we're experiencing here in the state of Utah. For me, I embrace it. I love it. And yes, I do make money from it in helping clients make that move and that transition here. But I also really do embrace change. I love what's happening in the state of Utah because, in my opinion and in my view, it's one of the best run states in the entire country. And I think we're doing it the right way. That doesn't mean, however, that we don't have problems and challenges and that we don't make mistakes. Of course, that's true as well. But in this video, it's all about 2026. And I want to talk about, as we get closer and closer to the end of 2025, with just one more month to go, 2026 is upon us, and we need to know what's going to happen next year. And so if you are considering making that move to the state of Utah, you need to be clear in what Utah is bringing and what's happening, because the Utah that you move to next year might look a little different in 3 to 5 years or 10 years down the road. And I want people to be well informed to know where the state of Utah is going. So that's my mission. That's my goal. And in this video is 2026. And the first story that I want to talk about doesn't necessarily pertain to 2026. It actually looks forward even further into 2034. But this is a recent announcement and unveiling, and I'll share the screen with you, of the new Olympic name and logo, temporary at least for the time being, up until 2029, when the final logo is revealed for the 2034 games. So this happened this week in the airport. Local leaders unveiled the new logo and the new name, believe it or not, for the 2034 Olympics. And if you know anything about the Olympics, it stands as ongoing tradition to name the Olympics after the city, the host city, that is the center of the hosting area of the Olympics. Now, when you're talking about summer games versus winter games, it can be quite different, because with winter games, you typically have more than just one city. You have surrounding areas that contribute to providing the space, the venues, the snow, the things that are needed to pull off the winter games. So if we reverse the clock a little bit and go back to 2002, the games were called Salt Lake City 2002. And it's longstanding tradition that the winter games and the summer games are named after the city. And this is a big deviation from that. This is branding the Olympics to Utah and not to Salt Lake City. And this is something I've talked about in other videos as well, because it's something we do very commonly here in the state. We actually identify as Utahns. We market, we publish, we brand ourselves as Utah. And that boils right down to our professional sports teams for the most part, with the Utah Jazz and the Utah Mammoth being named after the state and not the city. in which they reside. I think it's really cool that we maintain that identity as Utah. And as I look back in my early years, I always thought it was kind of odd and funny. And of course, there are other sports teams that really identify with the state in which they are located rather than the city, for example. But I always thought it was a little bit different, a little bit weird. But now I really, truly understand it. And here's why. When I travel, to anywhere, let's say I go to Florida or Texas or California, and people ask you, where are you from? The vast majority of Utahns are going to say, I'm from Utah. Or vice versa, if they're moving out of state into Utah, they'll say, I'm moving to Utah. They don't necessarily say, I'm moving to Provo, or I'm moving to Salt Lake City, or I'm moving to South Jordan, or whatever the city is. They usually say, I'm moving to Utah. And oddly enough, the conversations that happen around Utah are almost always Utah based. Even if it's Park City or Salt Lake City, people talk about Utah. And I think we've done a good job as branding this place as its own cohesive identity in Utah, which pulls in a lot more attention and a lot more people and eyeballs on our sporting events, for example, because now we can all identify as Utahns, regardless of whether or not we live in Salt Lake City or St. George or in Provo. It doesn't really matter. And for that reason, we get more eyeballs on our sports teams, and we draw people from all over the state and the region. And I think they're trying to do the same thing here for the Olympics to create that identity. But I also want to address this logo here. You can see right here at the center of the screen here, that's the logo that is at least a temporary placeholder until the final rendition of the logo is released for the 2034 games. They've actually created a lot of abstract shapes in there, jagged edges, to kind of represent the landscape of the state of Utah, as well as the events that happen during the Olympic Games. When you see the negative images within that logo or the positive images of it, you can see how Utah and the Olympics are kind of baked into that font, that custom font, so to speak. I think it's really difficult to read, especially if you're further away and if you haven't ever seen it before and identified it as the logo for the Utah Olympics, which sounds really funny to come off my tongue that way, the Utah Olympics. It seems odd, but I think the font's difficult. It probably will, just like so many new things, kind of grow on us a little bit. But nonetheless, it's not one that we are going to be married to forever. This is a placeholder for the next few years, at least to my understanding, at least for that period of time up until they come up with the final logo for the Olympics. And the question still remains, will the Olympics be named permanently after Utah, or will it be Salt Lake City 2034, just like it was Salt Lake City 2002, just over 2 decades ago? We shall see. I thought that was really interesting, though. And the next, as we go into 2026, we're getting closer and closer to the games. We're seeing a lot of stuff begin happening in preparation for that. We, of all host cities for any Olympic Games, have been very well prepared in not only building the venues for 2002, but we've maintained, added to, expanded, improved upon all of those venues. So we're honestly ready to go. The next biggest puzzle piece, so to speak, is the renovation to the Delta Center that is the home of the Utah Jazz and the Utah Mammoth, the NHL hockey team. That arena will act as a prime venue for many events, including figure skating, which in the Winter Olympics is one of the bigger ones. But I think we're really well prepared, and it's really easy for us to be prepared for 2034. So that's enough about the Olympics and 2034. Let's move on to what's going to happen in Utah in 2026. And for that, while I go through these talking points, I thought it'd be fun to just share some B-roll footage or some drone footage that I've been shooting over the last 2 months. Sometimes when I have 15 minutes, 20 minutes in between appointments and things, I'll pop my drone up and just get some good shots of the city, of the state, different areas, because I think it's interesting as we learn about what's happening. Maybe we can see some things as well. And so I thought I might just pop that up while I talk about these next things. So let me pull that screen up. And as I do this, we're kind of flying right through downtown Salt Lake City. And that's the first thing I want to talk about. Is one of the big things that's happening in 2026 is the completion of the renovation to the Salt Lake Temple. And if you don't know, the Salt Lake Temple is the most visited tourist attraction in the entire state of Utah. It sees typically 3 to 5 million visitors each year, and it usually leans closer to 5 million visitors per year. And so that's huge. That's a lot of people. And it really kind of compares to the number one most visited national park in Utah, which is Zion National Park, which typically gets about 5 million visitors per year as well. And Zion ranks amongst usually the top 3 to 4 visited national parks in the entire country. So this is a big deal. The Salt Lake Temple brings a lot of visitors from all over the country and the world, and it's been undergoing a renovation for the better part of a decade. It's going on for a long time, and it's a massive project to retroactively fit this building with seismic upgrades as well as a full renovation of not only the building but the surrounding buildings and the surrounding grounds, including Temple Square. But this particular spot is going to be completed in 2026. And let me rewind this just a little bit as I continue to talk about it. But as we see this this renovation be completed, it's going to bring millions and millions of people to come through the open house that they're going to hold for this temple. Now, as of right now, it's slated to finish and be completed in 2026. It's also planned to be an open house for a period of about 6 months. And during that open house period, that will be the one and only opportunity for the public, the general public, to come in and go through and tour that building. So regardless of whether or not you're religious or not, it doesn't matter. It's the most significant building in the state of Utah. And I would highly encourage anyone to go through the open house because it's the one and only time that the general public will ever be able to do so, until, at least when they dedicate the building for spiritual purposes. So this is a really cool opportunity. I think a lot of people are going to be super excited. I've had so many people move here already that just want to go check it out once it's completed, just to actually see what this thing is all about. I think it's kind of cool. I plan on checking it out as well. And I think I would encourage anyone to go check it out because this is one of those monumental moments in the history of the state of Utah that not many people will ever get to. The general public will never again be able to go back through that building. So for now, it's a 6-month period that they're going to host an open house. And it's expected that up to 5 million people or more are going to go through that open house during that period of time. It's potentially possible that the open house will be extended beyond that if there's need or interest. So we'll see how this plays out. 2026 is a big year in downtown Salt Lake City, and it's going to bring a lot of people. All right, moving on. Let's see here. I'm going to actually just share the screen here as I cover some more talking points that are going to be happening in Utah in 2026. So I've taken some good notes as to what the major things that I think you need to understand that are going to be happening in 2026. Number one, continued population growth and what that means for demand, because this really impacts you if you're considering making the move to or within the state of Utah. And according to the University of Utah's Kem C. Gardner Policy Institute, they forecast that Utah's population will continue to grow about 1.3 to 1.4% next year through 2026. There are also long-term projections that show the population of Utah will grow substantially over the coming decade plus, rising from roughly 3.6 million people today to over 5.5 or 5.6 million people by 2065. So the growth that's happening here in Utah is not temporary. It's here to stay. It's going to continue for decades to come. And for movers, for people like you, this means Utah remains a magnet for in-migration. It's great for people relocating, just like you might be doing. So for residents that already live here, it's also meaning there's increased demand with higher intensity of competition for housing, services, jobs, infrastructure, all those things. So ultimately, we need to expect in 2026 continued pressure on the housing and growth demand for communities and services, as well as the growth that we're seeing in the outlying areas and counties as well, including Eagle Mountain down to the southwest of Salt Lake City, as well as Tooele to the west. I think these areas are going to be the fastest growing areas in Utah for the next couple of decades. Moving on to the next talking point, let's talk a little bit more about housing. And after a period of relative stasis over the last 2 to 3 years, 2026 is shaping up as a rebound year. More active listings, more purchase applications, and we're actually already seeing more transactions happening, which means this is increased home sales. And we're expecting there to be more home sales in 2026 than we've had in 2025. Also, new home construction is forecasted to increase about 5% in 2026. This is going to help relieve some of the supply pressure, though not necessarily all of it. And the median home price is expected to rise modestly. Some forecasts show or suggest a modest 3 to 4% annual increase, but that could rise even more if the interest rates are really impacted much next year, because that's really the thing that's the lever that the Fed has on manipulating the market and bringing the demand out of the woodwork. So for those moving, more inventory means more choices. For those already in Utah, moving or upgrading may be easier than in the tight market frenzy of recent years back in the pandemic. But affordability still remains a concern and will be for well over a decade. So 2026 may be one of the more favorable windows in recent years to buy or to move up in home, especially for those who are patient and strategic and have a good strategy. And like I am saying all of the time, if you're looking to make a purchase, especially with new construction, I think the best time to buy is right now in Q4 of 2025 and into 2026. The real question remains, is it going to be that good in the springtime and the summertime this coming year? That I can't say. Who knows? It depends on so many factors. But for right now, it's a great time to buy for that reason. So moving on, let's talk about policy changes, because this is something that I feel is crucial to Utah's future. I think that the biggest concern for me as a local Utahn and as a resident is that we make this place affordable for my generation, my future generations, and your future generations, your kids, your future grandchildren, so that they have a place to live as well. And I think these policies that are coming in place, in large part from the state government, led by Spencer Cox, the governor, as well as others, they're reportedly considering aggressive reforms to increase the housing supply. Now, this might be really controversial, and anything the governor ever does, of course, is. And I think that anyone that wants the same outcome, they want to find more affordable housing, they get so much pushback from the locals that don't want this stuff to happen in their backyard. It's the NIMBY mentality that I've talked about in other videos. And I get it. I understand both sides of the equation. But the proposal is including statewide zoning preemption that could override local zoning restrictions and allow for smaller, more affordable housing units, regardless of city ordinances. This is a big deal. This feels to many people like we're stripping the freedom away from the cities and putting it into the hands of the state. But in my opinion, as a real estate professional, we've gone so long in allowing the cities to do this. Something has to happen. We're at a breaking point. We cannot continue to let housing grow and grow more of unaffordable each and every year. So I think it's crucial that we do something. And maybe there's a better option out there, but I think this is something that has to be discussed. But the goal here is building tens of thousands of starter homes and easing the housing crunch, especially important for people relocating from outside Utah and for younger residents trying to buy their first home here. If zoning reforms pass, expect new developments, higher density housing, including townhomes and smaller lots, and more quote unquote starter home options, which could make buying a first home easier and more accessible. And if there are more starter homes, then that alleviates the pressure on the middle ground homes, which means that market softens as well, to the point where real estate prices don't continue to become more and more unaffordable. And I think that's my biggest concern. A lot of people just assume that because I'm a real estate agent and broker, that I love these increasing prices. And to be honest with you, I don't. I think they need to stop. I think it's selfish of just sellers that are looking to sell to want, of course, the highest price we can get for a home. But what about the fabric of what makes our communities great in Utah? And what do we do to maintain that affordability so that our kids and future generations can live here as well? Okay. Next up is I want to talk about regional variation, because things are starting to shift in Utah. And I think 2026 is going to be another one of those years that really determines what's happening in the future. I talk quite frequently about the fastest growing areas in Utah being Eagle Mountain and Tooele County, which is the most up and coming spot. And I think these areas are becoming more appealing because more and more people are looking for that growth that's happening not 30 minutes away from downtown Salt Lake City necessarily, but 30 minutes away from the growth zone, 30 minutes away from jobs. So if you think of working in Lehigh along the Silicon Slopes corridor on I-15, Eagle Mountain is doable. It's 30 minutes away for most of the homes that are sitting out there in Eagle Mountain. So there's so many things to consider. And I think that 2026 is going to lead us into the next phase of regional variation with respect to these secondary markets that are 30 minutes away from the places where people will work and play, and not necessarily just downtown Salt Lake City, which of course has been the main driver in years and decades past. And last but not least is affordability and demand versus the supply. And supply demand challenges are real here in Utah. In a growth market, we get to feel the repercussions of living in a spot where we have such high demand for real estate. And it's that relationship between the supply and demand that really dictates where the home values are going. And as I look to the future and I look into 2026, I watch closely what's happening in our local market. In fact, let me just go back to my other screen here. I'm just going to remove this screen. So I do watch very regularly. Let's see here. What am I doing? And one of these days, I'm going to figure out how to use this software. I guess today's not that day. But anyway, back on the topic of affordability. It really just boils down to supply and demand. And each month, every single month since April of 2025, we've seen the supply and demand balance, and we call that the absorption rate. In other words, if no more homes were to hit the market today, how long would it take for all of the homes that are currently on the market to sell off? And that right there dictates how many months of inventory we have, and that is the absorption rate. And when we look at that relationship between supply and demand, who cares if there are more homes selling or fewer homes selling? It's all a relationship between the buyer demand and the supply in the homes on the market. So what we've noticed ever since April, that number has ticked upward. And now we're sitting at about 4.25 months of supply on the market, which puts us squarely in that balanced market territory. So anything under 3 months is considered a seller's market. Anything between 4 to 6 months is considered a neutral market. And anything over 6 months is definitely considered a buyer's market. But it's been so long here in Utah that we felt what a buyer's market really feels like. Most people today feel like it's very much a buyer's market. And that's just not always the case. In fact, it proves to be the case in that our real estate prices have gone up a couple of percent since last year. And as long as that is happening, we're only going to see the market stay about the same. So my prediction, based on everything that I'm watching happening in the state of Utah, I think the market's going to move fairly sideways with respect to appreciation. I think we may see 2, 3, 4, maybe up to 5% growth in pricing. Hopefully that number is lower rather than higher, and unless, of course, you're selling your home. But these are some big things that are happening within the real estate market in 2026. But that's not the entire big picture. So also in 2026, we're seeing the second year of construction happening at the Point development in Draper, just about 20 minutes south of downtown Salt Lake City. The Point development started kicking off in 2025. It's well underway. They're laying the groundwork, the infrastructure to get this development up and running and going vertical. And we're seeing that happen in 2026. That's a big deal. This area is going to explode in growth. It's going to be a major impact as well on the local economy and a contributor to Utah's economy as a whole. In addition to that, we also see the other big development that we're watching closely in Utah County in Vineyard in Utah City. This one is already online. There are places to move into already, but we're seeing the first of many, many things start to pop up in Utah City. So these developments in Utah City and the Point are definitely strong contenders. And so why is that important in 2026? Well, it's important not only if you're looking to live in these areas, but also if you're looking to do business here. And I have people reaching out to me that are looking to open up an office or another location in one of these areas, and they want to know some information as to when that happens. I have that information, as well as other areas and markets where you might be interested both living and working or starting a business, including my own backyard in Daybreak, where downtown Daybreak is really moving into phase 2 of its construction, with the next set of buildings really taking off. So this past year, they completed phase 1 in terms of the new ballpark for the AAA affiliate to the Los Angeles Angels in our Salt Lake Bees. They finished the ballpark, the movie theater, the bowling alley, a beautiful little concert venue that is now converted to an ice rink during the wintertime. And the apartments, the parking structures, and restaurants are opening up right here in downtown Daybreak. So whether it be downtown Daybreak or The Point or Utah City, or right now where I'm at my new office in Holiday, this is another development called Holiday Hills, where new office space is opening up and new residential living, as well as commercial, with many restaurants opening up. And just last month, they opened a new Trader Joe's downstairs on the bottom floor of my office. And so these are things that people really care about when they're making the move to a community, to know that you're not just moving to a state like Utah, like we talked about with the Olympics, but you want to live somewhere where you can feel connected in a community as well. And all of these big developments are really taking off. But in 2026, it's not just these big ones that are relevant. There are so many other developments happening around the state. And with recent announcements for another major development in Tooele County that's going to be very nice on the eastern bench of Tooele County, in between Stansbury Park and Tooele, so just north of Tooele City. This is another 1,200 home development that's going to kick off next year in 2026. And another big development that's on my radar that's coming up in northern Utah, north of Davis County, in Weber County, directly west of downtown Ogden, tucked up against the Great Salt Lake. This area is going to explode in growth as well. In fact, let me share my screen with you. Let's see here. Let me add this back onto my screen. Share this map here with you really quick. So this other major development is just north of Salt Lake City, and this is going to happen. It's west of Ogden. And if you come out here, just west of Ogden, you can see a lot of land out here. There's a ton of land on the west side here. In fact, let me change this over to a satellite view. It makes it a little bit easier to see. So here we have the Ogden metropolitan area, and this large area of land right here, just north of the Ogden Bay area of the Great Salt Lake. This land right here is being developed into a Daybreak style community that's going to be a major player in years to come. Now, it's going to take a few years for this to kick off, but I believe in 2026, we're going to see a massive influx of new developments that are being announced, not just in this region, but in Tooele County, in and around Tooele, in and around Eagle Mountain, and other areas, including if we go south of Salt Lake City and south of Provo. I think we're going to see other major developments pop up down here, and possibly even further south. So I think that those four regions, this region south of Utah Lake, this area west and north of Utah Lake in Eagle Mountain, as well as this county, this entire valley west of Salt Lake City in Tooele County, as well as up north on the west side of Ogden. These are the areas where we will be growing and seeing more and more growth. And I think 2026 is going to have some major developments announced. So I think I'm going to keep my ears perked, and I'm going to listen to those things, because these are the areas that are going to be fueling that growth. All right. I've got some questions here, some good comments. So thank you guys for adding some comments. Let's see if I can figure out how to do this. Let's remove this. All right. Adrian, premium raw land here appears to be some of the most expensive in the country. You couldn't be more right. The land in Utah compared to other states, and when I say that, what I'm talking about is the cost and value of one raw acre of land in Utah is the 6th most expensive state in the country. The only states, in fact, that have more expensive land are Hawaii, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and I'm not counting very well, but I think Rhode Island. But we are number six in the country. In fact, if you look at a map, that shows the cost of a raw acre of land, we are exponentially more expensive than all of the states in the West, much more expensive than Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, and Wyoming, and yes, even California. In fact, none of those states that I mentioned, or any of the states in the Western U.S., have a cost over $100,000 for one raw acre of land other than Utah. And Utah's exceeds $200,000. Now, that's not to say that there aren't markets that the land is much more expensive than Utah, or on the flip side, there are markets in Utah that are also less expensive as well. What I'm saying is, like in Southern California, of course, your land there is going to be much more expensive. But if you go out in Eastern Utah, in, for example, Carbon County or Emery County, you're going to definitely have less expensive land there as well. So there are nuances here, but what we're talking about is the state as a whole. So yes, Utah has very expensive land. Izzy, Weber County is where it's at. Sorry, not that area. All right, I gotcha. I hear you. And looks like you're also in Clinton, and construction is stupid ridiculous. You're exactly right. And to be honest with you, if you're here in Clinton or anywhere northward, up in West Haven or Plain City, get prepared, because the development is happening. And the extension of that new freeway in the West Davis corridor will help alleviate some of that traffic so that not everybody's making it their way eastward to I-15. It's going to bring 2 corridors through that area, which is going to help. But you are absolutely going to be growing and experiencing growing pains for many, many years. Speaking of the highway, right? That highway is definitely helpful. It does produce it does create a lot of efficiency in moving. But I think as empty as that highway is today, it's going to get packed. It's going to get full, and it's going to be extended. So these are some of the fastest growing areas in the state of Utah. I think it's worth mentioning also that 2026 is going to be a time when as we progress and move forward, where we're in a more stable, natural market, because it literally took us a couple of years after the pandemic to really stabilize all of the supply chain issues, the pricing issues, just the psychology behind buying and selling real estate or doing things changed in great part during the pandemic. And so now I feel like, being 3 years removed from that, we're seeing much more normalcy in the marketplace. And I think that's good for the most part, I think. And we're going to see what 2026 brings in terms of growth and in terms of everything else that's coming to the state of Utah. There's so much more that I hope does happen, especially in way of making or keeping our state great, because we do live in a beautiful place, and hopefully we can keep it that way. So if you are looking to make the move to the state of Utah, or you're already here and you're looking to make the move within it, I'm always here to be your real estate resource of choice. Reach out to my team and I. We're here to help and to serve and to guide you. And if you have any questions, please drop a question in this comment here, the comment section here. If you're watching live, or if you're watching the replay, drop a comment. I read these comments and answer them every single week. And if you do that, it really helps me get in tune with what you guys are looking to accomplish and what you need to know and learn in order to be the best educated and the most informed, which is, of course, my goal. So with that said, until next week's video, thanks.